Hello, everyone. We'll give everyone a little bit to join sessions and get situated, and then we'll get started. Okay, just one more minute, and then we'll get started. All right, as we give people time to join their sessions, I'll go through our disclaimer really quickly. This presentation was produced under U.S. Department of Education contract number GS00F115CA with Synergy Enterprises, Inc. The views expressed herein do not necessarily represent the positions or policies of the U.S. Department of Education. No official endorsement by the U.S. Department of Education of any product, commodity, service, or enterprise mentioned herein is intended or should be inferred. All right, so now that we got through that mouthful, I am your presenter for this session today. My name is Casey. My background, if you have not heard my little spiel before, I'll do it really quick. So my background is primarily in language and literacy development, human-centered design or design thinking, and restorative discipline. That's kind of what I have spent a lot of my career on. I have experience as a teacher, an instructional coach for the humanities, a reading interventionist, assistant principal, and curriculum designer. But out of everything that I've done, my proudest achievement is being on the founding team for a design thinking high school where external partnerships were critical to our success. And so in this presentation, I'm going to be talking about cultivating collaborative and effective partnerships, particularly through the lens of thinking about external partners or non-traditional partnerships. So now that you know a little bit more about me, I'll kind of take you through the objectives for today's session. So first, we're going to begin by diving into some of the key ingredients for collaborative and effective partnerships. These are things that you're going to want to make sure that you have as an organization or as a program before you get into those partnership pieces and building and finding partnerships. Sometimes we just jump right into kind of grabbing onto people because we know we're going to need partners, we know we're going to need more resources, but you really want to be thoughtful about if you're in a position to support partnerships and then what really you're asking people for when they're supporting you. So that's really getting at what are the factors and organizational conditions that are necessary to nurture collaborative and effective partnerships. Then we're going to review some exemplar partnerships and see what ingredients may be critical to their own success. And then after that, we'll cover strategies for identifying potential partners, including grounding that identification of partners in your own organizational needs as well as team strengths. And then we'll end with bringing it back to that why and ideas around communicating with some potential partners. So before we get into the key ingredients of a collaborative and effective partnership, why are partnerships important? And I think thinking about the why, starting with the why and then ending with the why, really centers us on like, what are we even looking for when we are partnering with people, and I think having a clear picture of that is really the first step. So creating partnerships, it can allow your organization to leverage resources that you may not have or that may be constrained for you and your organization. So depending on where you're at in achieving your goals, realizing your vision, where you're at in building your programming and things like that. At any time, you may need one or more of these things out of your partnerships. And, keep in mind that that will likely change over time as well. Sometimes you might not have enough staff. Maybe you need to outsource some projects and things because realistically you don't have the personnel or the time between personnel to make something happen, which might look like a little bit of a different partnership than if it's something where we just need space or we need supplies, we need particular types of technology that maybe we don't have access to or can't purchase. And so those partnerships might look different, and the degree to which you collaborate with them might be different. It can also help you market and communicate services to a broader audience, particularly when we're thinking about how we can actually leverage stakeholders as partners, because that community buy-in in our programming is really important as well. And then it can add to the expertise and credibility of your programming if you are intentional with your partnerships. So what are some of those key ingredients of cultivating collaborative and effective partnerships? Before we get into some of that, or as we get into some of that, I'm curious from y'all's end, if there is a current partnership that you have that you find really effective. And if so, what is a practice that you think has contributed to that partnership's effectiveness? So if there's a partner that you already have and that partnership is doing great things for your programming, what is something that you think is contributing to that partnership's success? And you can just share that in the chat. And it can be something simple. Maybe you've established great lines of communication with a particular partner that has made that partnership more effective. Well, you guys can keep thinking about that. If you think of something that you want to share, or you think of any questions, of course, you can always share those things in the chat. So the first thing I'm going to talk about in terms of conditions or practices that are helpful when developing external partnerships. The first is direction and desired outcome. You can also kind of think of this as like mission, vision, core values, those type of things. And so this is an important ingredient because lack of clear direction and goals leads to disengagement from the work and could make it more difficult to secure partnerships, right? So before deciding on potential partners and reaching out to them, you want to make sure that you've asked yourself, where is our direction? Why does it matter? And more than just being able to understand the direction and the desired outcome for yourself or the people that you work with, can you communicate that, right? So being able to communicate a clear vision, it creates motivation, creates purpose. And so your strategy for communicating the direction and desired outcome is as important as knowing what they are. So for successful partnerships, the direction and desired outcome of your programming must be understood and resonate. So then how you communicate that is important. And we started with that one because it really is kind of like the basis of all of the other pieces. So in a second, we're going to pop up a poll here, and I want you to just think about what percentage of your current employees, staff, partners, what percentage do you think could communicate your program's vision to someone else right now? So you should see that poll pop up. So what percentage of your current employees and partners do you think could communicate your program's vision? Okay, thank you all for your participation. Okay, so you can kind of see where we all fall. Okay, I'm impressed with the people that said 90 to 100. I don't think I'd have ever been able to say that. So that's that's a case where I really want you to consider how you answered that question. So sometimes we can take knowledge of direction and desired outcome for granted, right? So if I know, I just kind of assume, everyone else that I'm working with also knows or is on the same page. So you can't really take that for granted, but you have to be intentional about that. So think about how equipped your organization is to communicate this to new partners, right? How many people could reiterate what your vision is? What percentage of your current employees and partners could communicate your program's vision? So if you think that that's currently a low percentage, I want you to kind of reflect on why that might be. Is it that it's not defined? Is it defined but not communicated frequently? Is it defined and communicated, but there's a lack of buy-in, right? So each of those different things has a different approach to addressing it. And your direction and desired outcome as part of crafting that and living out that authentic aspirational commitment, these are some of the important considerations that can help enhance knowledge of and commitment to the direction and desired outcome. So you want to accurately describe your organization, even if aspirational. So there's kind of a fine line between, right? A vision is something that, maybe we haven't realized yet, but there is a fine line between something that is aspirational and something that just isn't authentic to your organization or the everyday work that your organization is doing. Then you want it to differentiate you from others in the field. So what is important or special about your work? If I'm going to partner with you, I want to know, why your approach is something that I should buy into and support. It should be embodied by all organization leaders, really all of your staff. And then if you work in a school, all the way down to how are students embodying it. If you're really going to kind of get to this desired outcome. And then woven into the fabric of the organization. So it should be routinely, in things as far as print. It should be, the things that you're reinforcing, the things that you're rewarding in your organization. And like I said, another piece to this that a lot of companies have are core values. So that's something that if your organization doesn't have it, you can always create a set of core values. A lot of organizations might have a vision or a mission, but be lacking this component. And so this is just an easy way to kind of communicate the culture of your organization to people. This is just an example from Paycom. But core values basically can be a quick how-to, right? That can let potential employees as well as partners know that in addition to where you're going being aligned, that they can resonate with the how you're getting there as well. So like the culture and the fabric of your organization. And you'll see in the links for today's session that there are a few supplemental resources for you to continue to think about how or what is important in deciding or communicating your direction and desired outcome. So there's something for every stage there. You could be writing a vision, you could be diving deeper into creating organizational culture, or trying to keep sight of a vision that has been around for a while, right? And so those resources are there for you in the links for today's session. The next ingredient that we're going to cover is shared responsibility. So to foster collaboration and create ongoing relationships with other people and organizations, partnerships should not feel one-sided. So there are many ways that you can effectively share responsibility in your organization and between partners. These are just a few things that are listed here. For instance, you'll want to assign unique aligned roles, including with partners. There's less motivation to partner if it's unclear, right, what pieces I am responsible for versus what pieces the other partner is responsible for, versus, as a partner, do I feel like my partnership is necessary? Are there unique responsibilities that I can actually contribute to and help with? So you want to be intentional with those pieces, right? If people are unclear about their role, or feel that it is not aligned to their skill set or resources, or they see no thoughtful variation between roles, then it creates a lack of motivation to be involved in a project. And you also want to make sure that the roles or the work that you're doing on a day-to-day basis is related to the direction and desired outcome, as we discussed on the previous slides. And then as part of this sense of shared responsibility, you also want a shared sense of responsibility to the community. And you can do that by creating a sense of community with partners, right? So knowing what is important to your partners, knowing what their direction and desired outcome is, and engaging with them on what is important to them as well, inviting them into decision-making and idea formation. And then small ways to create community can also include taking partner feedback and demonstrating a respect for your partner's time, right? So if you ask them to do certain things, being upfront about what type of commitment they're going to be making with their partnership, what types of resources they're going to be contributing, what their responsibilities are, right? Having clarity and an upfront piece to all of those things can help create a smoother partnership. And then lastly, ensuring that partners are receiving adequate communication. I know communication is something that I feel like we all kind of know is important, but for whatever reason, it's actually really hard to master timely and adequate communication. And so sometimes it's best to just start with over communication, and then a partner can kind of tell you, how to tailor that to their desires, but you don't want to just assume that they don't want certain communications. And as part of really all of these things, so you'll see in the last one that we'll discuss, as well as in the first two that we discussed, right, really clearly defined processes goes through all of these components, right? Because the roles and responsibilities must be clearly defined. The direction that you're going in must be clearly defined, even down to kind of those smaller details that help you run day-to-day operations, right? So it should be documented who handles what, when, and how, and who handles what, when, and how should be clear to people within your organization. It prevents conflict in your organization, but also with partners outside of your organization, right? So that partners are clear on who they need to go to ask certain questions, or what the kind of process is for getting feedback on something or for submitting something. So all of those processes need to be understood by everyone. It's kind of like, I used to be a high school teacher, and it's kind of like working with teenagers. That's kind of what partnerships is like managing a classroom full of teenagers with different needs and different learning styles and things like that, down to, right, sometimes if a student doesn't know what to do, right? If they don't know the protocol for, okay, I was absent, what do I do about my missing work? If they don't understand that process, they don't know what it is, then a lot of times they'll just disengage, right? I'm not going to try to figure out the process because it's too much of a mess. So you want to try to cut through as much of that as possible, so that people know who to go to with what, and have direct lines of communication with the people they need to have those communication lines with. And you need to understand how their partnership in particular runs, right? They need to know this is your point of contact. They need to know when meetings are, when their particular responsibilities take place. They need to understand how they're contributing to activities and when. Dates and deadlines should be clearly communicated ahead of time as much as possible. And as much as you can make your communication routine, right, that might help you on your side as well. So if you can come up with sort of a structure or a process for even your communication with partners, right? Like you'll get a weekly status update, or you'll come to this meeting once a month, or whatever that looks like, so that people know at least when they can expect that next communication. And then the last thing we'll talk about in this area is progress awareness. So communicating progress toward the desired outcome to partners. So as part of your communication with partners, you want to communicate progress towards the desired outcome to partners. A study by the Harvard Business Review found that emotions can affect motivation and performance in workplaces. And so specific to progress awareness, they found that the most important impact in boosting emotion was making progress, or feeling like you're making progress towards something, even if people did not accomplish the big goal or the main goal. They found that the boost of positive emotions just from knowing where you're at and knowing what progress has been made, having a clear understanding of where you are in relation to that larger goal, actually gives you a sense of motivation and accomplishment that can boost your work performance. So be proactive about providing these progress updates. Like I said, if you schedule it out, that can be helpful for both your internal employees, as well as your community, as well as your partners, right? Because it can just be some communication that is getting shared with all stakeholders on a routine basis, which makes people feel like they're in the loop, progress is being made, right? What they are contributing is making a difference. So in those areas in particular, those ingredients there, which one do you think is your strongest area currently? And then which one do you feel like is your area of opportunity? And this is just to give you a second to really reflect on where your organization or programming is at this point. So it could be that you all share responsibility and you know where you're going, but maybe you don't really track progress and you need to think through what that looks like for you. Or maybe your processes aren't clearly defined and you need to think through what that looks like, which could even be like sitting down as an executive team and saying, okay, what needs a process, and kind of brain dumping that, and then going from there to develop those clear processes. So even I know when we opened a school, something we did as far as clearly defining processes was we sat there as a founding team and we said, okay, these are the things that parents need to know. These are the things that students need to know how to do. These are the things that a lot of our external partners were local businesses. So these are the things that these local businesses or nonprofits need to know how to do, right? Who to contact or things like that. What happens if I'm absent? All of those processes down to how you go to lunch, how you come back from lunch. So sometimes there's like these little things that you don't even realize need a process, but they do. So doing that little brain dump can be helpful. So there's kind of the results. You can see where we're at. Of course, if you're strong in one area that others need help in, our talking circles and things like that are always a good time to share our expertise. Okay, so now we're going to go into some exemplar partnerships. And for these next few slides, I'm going to ask you to, after I kind of talk about it, to think through what ingredients do you think they are really relying on to make that a strong partnership, or what do you think is really exemplar about that partnership. So no right or wrong answers. I'll tell you my thoughts after you take the poll for each slide, but just so you kind of know that that is forthcoming. Okay, so first we have Clark University and Worcester Public Schools. So together they established a K-16 collaborative. So this is a case where the partnership actually was developed to build new programming. So in this sense, they were sort of forming a partnership while they were also building the program, kind of like, you know, building the plane while you're flying it. So in a situation where you're partnering on new programming, right, some of the key ingredients may not be things that you necessarily already have in your program. They could be things you're developing alongside a partner, but they are things that even if you're developing them alongside a partner in a scenario like this, you want to make sure that you are intentionally developing them, whether that is on your own prior to developing a partnership or in conjunction with a partner. But just kind of be aware, though, that you can build the partnership while also kind of designing these things. That just needs to be clear that that's the intention of the partnership, is really to build out that programming together, right, rather than by your organization on the front end. So in this case, each partner is kind of gaining equally from the partnership. So each partner is contributing people, time, expertise, space, and in some cases supplies. The K-16 collaborative uses a rounds model for professional development that is based on the training structure of teaching hospitals. So they took that structure, they applied that structure, and that really drives their processes for their collaborative. Is that kind of well-known and well-used structure that they have now modified for their use. And so their version engages groups of K-12 teachers, university professors, and teacher prep students in learning together about teaching practice. So during student teaching, students take weekly turns conducting rounds. And Clark University and Worcester describe this model as a move towards increasing collaborative relationships, reflection, research, and study across that kind of post-secondary K-12 gap in between. So kind of based on this particular partnership, which key ingredients would you suspect that this partnership has going really well for them? And like I said, there's no right or wrong answer. It's just to take a second to reflect on what we heard, and then I'll kind of give you my thoughts. And I think you should be able to do more than one if you wanted to, not that you have to. A couple more seconds. All right, I'll share the results with you all so you can kind of see where people's thoughts are. A three-way split between the first three, which I would agree with you. I think that each of these three is noticeable in their model, and I probably also would have left off progress awareness, just because that's not clearly communicated, although you could say there are opportunities where they could theoretically do those things, right? So in this partnership, processes and roles are clearly defined. So they have a really tight model, which helps their partnership be effective. So because that rounds model is very clearly defined, it rotates on a set schedule, and everybody in this partnership pretty much knows like what the schedule looks like. They understand the purpose, right? So it's something that you guys pointed out as well. The direction and desired outcome of the program is clear, and it's communicated in the marketing of their program with one another. Obviously, they developed it together in this partnership because this partnership was really at the grassroots stage of developing this program here. And if you wanted to learn more about, so if you're in like a university setting or something and you wanted to learn more about their rounds model that they use in this program, I did include a link to that on my session links for today. So if that's something you're interested in reading more about their actual model or approach, you can go there for that. And then the next model is another university model. So in this model, we're looking at Kansas State University's professional development schools model. The university partners with 3 local school districts. So in this case, this is a partnership with more than one person. So in the other model, it was a partnership between 2 people. In this case, you have these 4 people, 3 local school districts and Kansas State. And so they partner to run multiple professional development schools. So in cases where there are several partners, like in this one, developing the key ingredients becomes even more critical, right? So if I have 3 school districts, my communication really needs to be on point. That's where having the progress monitoring and, you know, being specific about if this is my desired outcome, I'm going to backwards plan from that. These are kind of the intermediate goals that I should be reaching. This is when I'm going to assess, you know, how I'm doing towards the direction and desired outcome. And even if you're not quite where you want to be, still communicating where you're at is helpful. And don't be, you know, scared to communicate, hey, we're not really exactly where we wanted to be. Because that can help your organization learn and maybe tweak some systems that are not working. And so in Kansas State's partnership, all teachers and principals from the 17 sites are collaborative partners in this model alongside the Kansas State faculty and teacher prep participants. So in this case, both the university and the school's faculties are involved in all stages of the teacher prep program, school improvement, curriculum development, and collaborative action research projects. So each school site has at least one clinical instructor and Kansas State faculty member that works with the principal to coordinate the school's activities and experiences. All right, and at this time, we'll pop up a poll for this particular partnership. So what key ingredients do you suspect that this partnership does particularly well? Okay. Thank you for your participation. I'll share results so we can kind of see where we're at. Okay, this one a little bit more different thoughts on this one. I would also lean towards shared responsibility, although I could definitely see pieces of these others here as well. I did choose this partnership because it is exemplary in shared responsibility. So as you can see from their structure, the personnel from each side, each organization is completely intertwined in nearly all of the activities of the model, and they're kind of both supporting one another and are woven together. So all personnel are benefiting from the model, whether it's through creating impact or if you're on the learner side as well. Okay, our third example, moving out of that university lens, our third example is California State Parks. They do a lot of different partnership things, so I can't really cover, you know, all the wonderful partnering that they do, but they do partner with several tribes, schools, teachers, people on a rotating basis. Some of their partners include, like I said, local schools, tribes, and educators. And some of the people that do a lot of the work bridging the Park Service with local education and culture are the California State Park interpreters. And I just wanted to put a little note on here about what California State Parks defines interpretation as. So they're involved in education and cultural partnerships across the communities, but they define interpretation as a special form of communication that helps people understand, appreciate, and emotionally connect with the rich natural and cultural heritage preserved in parks. And so there you have kind of this like liaison piece, right, where California State Parks is devoting specific personnel to kind of doing some of these education partnerships and things like that. And if you are looking for potential partners, looking for organizations like this or people that are doing this work in your area would be a good place to start, because even though you may not as an organization be really great at the partnership thing yet, organizations that are established, like someone like the California State Parks, or that have like these personnel pieces, like the interpreters, where they're able to sort of be a liaison between groups, those would be really good potential partners because they are well-versed in partnerships and in navigating partnerships. And you can, you know, if you're observant to some of these more established partners and you kind of use some of those existing partnership components that they've built, then you can learn from sort of how they've established partnerships and how they've set up partnership routines there. So and they partner with entities in multiple ways. So they partner on curriculum needs, and they also sponsor activities alongside schools and tribes that invite students to investigate, research, and participate in interactive learning experiences. And they offer grants as well, which can be found on their website if that was something you wanted to go specifically look into. But look for like area nonprofits, look for local, state, national entities that are around you that do, you know, already kind of partner with schools or partner with people that have these personnel that can kind of be liaisons between. And a lot of times, you know, some of this stuff might not be super well advertised. So it's still worth reaching out, even if, you know, for example, didn't know that they did kind of all of these things. It's worth reaching out and seeing how they are willing to partner. Oh, I forgot to do our poll. Okay, so in this case, what would you say that California State Parks does really well in terms of their partnering? A couple more seconds. I'll share those results so y'all can kind of see. Yeah, so I would say definitely direction and desired outcome for sure. I think that you can see in the way that they define interpretation, in the way that they have personnel, you know, devoted to communicating kind of the educational pieces, communicating the cultural pieces, and forming partnerships with communities, you know, clearly communicates that this is a value of their organizations. And so that direction and desired outcome is clear from each way that they partner, even though they may partner with people in a lot of different ways. Okay, and then another one, I try to give you all kind of varying examples This is our last example here, for example, our partnerships. So Confederated Salish and Kootenai and Muckleshoot tribes, it's a tribal partnership that creates aviation biofuel from twigs and small branches that would have been burned after timber harvest. So this last partnership that we're looking at is part of the Northwest Advanced Renewables Alliance Tribal Partnership Program. So in this case, it's not an education example, but I think it's a great example of tribal collaboration, right? So this program leverages the holistic land management approaches of Native American tribes. It also engages students from tribal colleges in bioenergy research, provides them with relevant land management skills, and prepares them for graduate school. So essentially, the tribes work together to make this aviation biofuel, and students are involved from the local tribal colleges to be a part of kind of this process of creating this fuel out of holistic land management approaches of Native American tribes. And they are actually about to test it. So very cool. So for this last one, what is an ingredient that you think this partnership has? And as y'all are answering that question, I included this last one because I wanted you to really start thinking creatively about who can your partners be. A lot of times we go outside of our communities, but you could even partner with another tribe, another school, stakeholders in your communities. We'll talk about leveraging stakeholders in a little bit too. In the interest of time, I'm going to go ahead and share the results of that one. Yeah, this one I think was definitely a little less clear in terms of what direction I would go, but I do think that there's a clear and impactful direction and desired outcome, right? So what they're working on has a very clear end goal, right? They want to develop a biofuel that can be used in aviation. So there's a clear goal there that everyone is kind of working around. I also think that even though it's not readily laid out here, I think if you consider how a lot of these scientific things, these scientific partnerships, because it's done through this very process-oriented kind of research lens, it really lends itself to progress awareness, right? So for instance, like if my end goal is to create a biofuel that I can use in aviation, I know what my progress is towards that, right? As you're working on it, if you have the fuel created or not. And then as you, like I said, they're going to test it. So then everybody can know, okay, we developed this didn't work. We need to adjust it for this. And that's something that, depending on what types of programming you're doing, some programming naturally kind of lends itself to more very obvious progress monitoring, and some things it's not necessarily obvious what the progress is. So when it's not obvious, then being intentional about making progress obvious. So then when you're thinking about identifying potential partners for yourselves, so what are some strategies for identifying potential partners? There are several methods that you could use to identify partners, but in any case, for an effective partnership, you want to understand your needs and your organizational capacity. And there are several ways that you can investigate your own needs and organizational strengths. Today, we're going to focus on covering needs assessments and understanding Stanford's 8 design abilities, which you can apply to your program design. But these are not the only ways to assess for strengths and weaknesses or needs. What I really want you to take away from this section is that you always want to start with reflecting on what exists, right? What key ingredients do you have? What are things that need to be created? What do you want out of a partnership? What do you need, right? Because if you start with just, okay, here's a whole bunch of different people that I can ask to do things for my organization, then people are less likely to commit to partnering when it doesn't have that clarity. And then you end up managing partnerships that honestly maybe you don't need, because it really should be based on what gaps exist between your current conditions and your desired outcome. So we're going to talk about starting with a needs assessment, but essentially you start with assessment. What is it that your organization is doing well? What is it that you need some support around? And your support should be those partnerships or leveraging stakeholders. So a needs assessment seeks to uncover what gaps exist between current conditions, or what is, and your desired conditions, your vision, your what should be. And you find these gaps using data. So multiple data types that span quantitative and qualitative measures is best in this case. You don't want to just rely on one piece of data. You want a really good kind of story of data. A couple of examples of quantitative data are academic and engagement data. So that may be attendance rates, that may be test scores, college entrance exams, whatever kind of types of academic maps, results, whatever types of like academic or engagement numerical measures you're using. And then, so those could be numbers that describe mastery, skill, growth, graduation, attendance, student engagement with services, and parent engagement. And then a couple of qualitative measures would include things like empathy interviews and surveys. And there are several empathy interview protocols online, particularly if you go to Stanford's D School Public Library. There's a lot of empathy interview resources on there as far as following protocols and things of that nature. Which empathy interviews can be helpful if you want to learn more about how a specific experience within your organization, what that specific experience is like. So like, how do students experience your services? How do teachers experience them? How do parents experience them? So, and then there are several computer programs that can help you streamline and analyze this data as well. So those are just some examples on the screen there of things that can help you streamline and analyze the data. There are some online programs that will actually make like word clouds out of qualitative data for you. And then there's also, if you're not familiar, Microsoft Power BI is kind of similar to that, Excel, but the data visualization, I would say, is a little more user-friendly. So if you're kind of starting out with some of that stuff, that may be something that you want to play around with. Okay, so once you've determined the gaps using the data, you want to place those gaps or needs in a priority order. And determine priority, consider the greatest impact and your sphere of greatest influence. So when I think about priority, whatever is highest priority should both be something that is, if I address this gap or if I address this need, then it is really going to impact students, or it's really going to move my progress forward in a meaningful way. But also your highest priority should be something that is within your locus of control. A lot of times we can sort of be spinning on our wheels on trying to address a need that maybe we just realistically cannot solve as readily as some of our other needs. So you want to be strategic in that sense. And then based on your priorities, you then define and implement strategies and evidence-based interventions that align to your top priority needs. And this is where I would add in thinking about those partnerships, because you also want to target partners and resources that will address those top priority needs. If you said, oh, I have this need, but it's actually pretty low priority, then you don't want to focus a lot of time and energy on finding a partner or building out something with a partner in that particular area, because that is not one of those priority needs. So a needs assessment can help you really streamline the decisions that you're making in terms of how you're using your partners, which partners you're reaching out to, and kind of what you're focusing on for that year. Sometimes we, try to focus on everything and get nothing accomplished. So starting in this place where you have things that are very clearly defined, that are based on data, can help you not only choose the appropriate partners, but also communicate with them. So the other piece of that, and I wanted to share this with you. So it's also in my links, but I would say if you're interested in doing a needs assessment, which is definitely a place I would start before diving into creating new partnerships, I would say to look at this needs assessment guidebook. So I just put it in the chat, but it's also on my session links for today. But to get started with needs assessment, I would highly recommend reading that. It's housed on the OESE website. It's a really good guidebook if you're just kind of getting started with a needs assessment. And then in addition to the needs assessment, so that's really looking at kind of like a bird's eye view. It's looking at your organization. Where does our organization stand? Where does our programming stand? What are gaps that we have kind of as a unit? And then in addition to grounding your partnership needs and the results of a needs assessment or something like that, you may also want to ground your partnerships in your program design strengths and weaknesses of your existing team and organization, right? On most teams, you kind of have, right, different people that have different personalities, experiences, that are contributing different things to the team or bringing different things to the table. And you need all of those people to have a very, strong organization, right? We can't all do all the things or be all the things. So you want to have in your culture this ability to reflect on yourself and on the composition of your team, right? What are areas of strength for you as far as program design? What are areas of strength for your other team members? And then how are other organizations or potential partners strong in areas that may help your programming? So if you're not particularly strong in one area, maybe there's an organization that is really great at navigating ambiguity, for example, right? Or maybe there's a computer program that would be really helpful to help you synthesize information, things like that. Even something as, like I said, I'm going to touch on leveraging stakeholders, even something as far as like, there are people in your community that, right, could be helping build your program or filling in some of these gaps that you have, where you don't necessarily always need to go to this business or this organization or directly to the school. Those partnerships are great, but you also, it's kind of like I said with the priorities. You don't want to make something your top priority that's just completely unrealistic. And so if you're not able to engage with a partner you had in mind or something, I would encourage you to keep looking and think creatively about what partnerships could look like. So like I talked about, there's 8 design abilities. Here you can see what those 8 design abilities are. And I'll go over them kind of 4 and then 4. And so the first one, learning from others, means that you can empathize with and embrace diverse viewpoints. It also means that you observe and learn from watching others and applying it to your own context. And then having a strength in experimenting rapidly is an ability to be able to quickly generate and evaluate ideas. This is that big idea person. This is not, so you can kind of think of this as like, this is the person that's like, oh, what about this? Or what about this? Or I have this idea, or we could do this. And then that's going to like bring the energy and a million ideas to a brainstorming session. So not the person that is like, okay, but how are we going to do that? Or so not that person, right? Both of those people are very important on a team, but they kind of serve those different purposes, right? So like if you have a bunch of big ideas people, maybe the people you partner with, even if it's like the parent group, right? Maybe you just have a group of parents that are super organized, and would be great at kind of some of those detailed things that maybe your team doesn't always immediately focus on or have a strength in. And then the next ability is synthesizing information. So a strength in this area means that you can make sense of lots of data to find insight and opportunity. And then that fourth one is the ability to build and craft intentionally. So that's kind of the opposite of what I was saying before. This is the person that is like, okay, so how are we going to do that? Or, oh, that needs a process. That person's going to kind of push you to think through those details and to dig down. So they're the person that is really thoughtful about construction. What are we doing? How are we doing it? How do our stakeholders feel about it? And again, that might even come from partnering with groups like parents, right? That can challenge you, that can ask you those questions. Even if they can't necessarily provide you with particular resources or supplies, they can kind of provide you with perspective, which is another important thing to get from partnership. So here are other ways to think about those first four abilities. It's kind of just giving you a visual representation and a quick definition. So areas where you or your organization are not strong is also an opportunity to engage partners or stakeholders. It's also something you can think about in your hiring practices. What are ways that we can be complementary to what is in existence? And then the other four here, we have navigate ambiguity. So someone strong in this area has the ability to recognize and persist in the discomfort of not knowing. And then they develop tactics to overcome when a clear path forward does not exist. That's particularly important if you, right, are trying to get something going, get something off the ground. You want to surround yourself with people or with an organization that maybe was a startup that likely would know how to navigate ambiguity. Those are the type of people you'd want to engage in that idea creation phase. And then next is communicate deliberately. So if you're strong in that area, that means you have the ability to form, capture, and relate stories, ideas, concepts, reflections, and learnings to the appropriate audiences. You can tailor your communications to different audiences. And so also this might be an area too, where maybe it's a student in your program that is a great storyteller that could really help you communicate your vision and things like that. So it's, when you're thinking about ways to partner with people, get creative with some of the resources and people that are kind of already around you as well. And then the next ability, moving between concrete and abstract, it kind of builds on that previous one. It also involves communication. This ability involves understanding stakeholders and purpose in order to define your program offerings. And this is a place too where things like using parents or elders or students as kind of spokespeople and storytellers for your work can also be helpful in getting buy-in, in getting people that want to volunteer and getting people that want to partner with you and getting the word out there. And they can kind of communicate to different groups of people and tailor that communication. And then the last ability is designing your design work. So there's a lot of different ways that you could explain that one, but probably the most straightforward way to think about it is having a strength in project management. So can you put the people, tools, techniques, and processes together effectively to get from point A to that desired outcome? And then this is, other ways to think about those abilities. And I am also going to share in the chat with you. This is another link that is on my session links for this one as well. But there is a Design Abilities activity book that can kind of help you continue to reflect on these abilities and grow in them. And so I highly recommend it. Also comes from that Stanford D School Public Library, which has a wealth of resources and things for building teams and team cultures and designing programming. So highly recommend checking that out as well. All right, so at this time, we're going to pop up another poll. So which of those design abilities, and they're still on the screen, which design ability would you say is a strength for your team? And which design ability would you benefit from support in? And whichever one you're really thinking you would benefit from support in, that's where I would challenge you to start creating a list of potential partners that are strong in that area, or that have skills or existing processes, right, that you maybe could borrow. Thank you to those who have answered so far. Okay. I'll share so we can kind of see where everyone's at in the room. Thank you all for your participation. Okay, so as we think about partnerships and as we move into identifying and communicating with potential partners, I want you to consider, how can you include your stakeholders as partners? So partnering with people close to your target audience can ensure that the content and methods of services are appropriate for their needs. So forming meaningful partnerships with close stakeholders and inviting them into the programming efforts can increase buy-in and awareness of services. And there are many ways that you could partner with a stakeholder or a group of stakeholders. For instance, some of us said that we struggle with communicating deliberately. What are ways that maybe you could outsource some of your communication to a partner? Oh, Chris, thank you. I'll double check it. Weird, it does not give me one. One second, I'll give you guys a working link. Okay, perfect. Thank you, Chris. Okay, so that second link should work. Sorry about that. But anyways, as some of us said, that communicating deliberately, how can you outsource some of your communication to parents, students, right? Maybe there's a community component as far as like a community newsletter or, something to that effect that can help with communicating progress awareness, can help with having a clearly defined process, and can also increase buy-in and awareness of services. Think through what can be a volunteer opportunity. Are there, ways that you can invite people in as volunteers? Are there structures that you can create to streamline signing up, to allow volunteers to give you feedback, to create some of those processes that you would have with an external partner? And then are there stakeholders who can provide a service? So for instance, some schools use like elder guides in their language classes. So are there ways that you can partner with people in your community to help you, enhance these services that you're providing students? And there are many potential partners, of course. So this is not an exhaustive list of potential partners, but you can kind of just use it as a starting point to generate ideas. So for instance, your tribal council, state and local government, parks and recreation departments. So I would encourage you to look at both kind of the city or town level, as well as if you have something like California State Parks, for example, those would be good entities to reach out to that probably already have some parameters as far as partnerships in place. You have your libraries, and then there's other things within that in terms of, like I said, there's different things you can get out of partnerships. One of the things you can get out of partnerships is supplies. So a place like Half Price Books, for example, will donate free books. So it's a way to get supplies, but not in a way that is necessarily an ongoing external partnership that you have to continue to maintain. So, think through how you can use, some of those things and be strategic with the way that you're partnering and how you're devoting your energy to partnerships. You have your local small businesses, health service centers, colleges and universities, nonprofits, your schools and districts, parent organizations, whether that be, within schools or districts, but also any like local community organizations that that you have as well. And then evaluators. And there was a session earlier, if you all saw it, on evaluations and using outside evaluators. So I recommend watching that if you did not go. So a theme of a lot of today's session has been communication, even in other parts, right? Clear processes and everything has a communication component to it. So while I've mentioned it in several areas, we're going to recap important considerations for communicating with potential partners. So first, identify and profile your intended partners. This is where you kind of want to have that tag team of, we talked about the design abilities. You want to have that kind of ideation phase where you're like, okay, here's a whole bunch of ideas, just rapid fire. I'm not going to judge them initially. Let's just rapid fire ideas. And then you go back over the list with that kind of that detailed lens, that intentional design lens of like, okay, what can they help me with? How can they partner with me? Do they have the capacity to partner? Do I think they do? Do we have the capacity to support that partnership? What types of communication might they value, right? If I'm working with a group of parents versus students versus a local business, they all might want, different levels of communication, different types of communication. They're going to care about different things from one another. So I want to be intentional about that. That's another detail to think through. And then narrow that down. And so next you want to establish communication with who you've narrowed your list down to. So communicate your project's direction and desired outcome, make a clear ask of a potential partner, and make sure your ask is both clear and high leverage based on your organizational needs and the partner's resources. So you should really be aware of who you're asking for, what you already have and what you need. Before you even approach a potential partner. And then provide time commitments and timelines when possible to potential partners. So being able to communicate to someone, hey, this is specifically how we would benefit from partnering with you. And we foresee that, these are the things we would ask you to partner on. And it might be, this amount of time, or we need you to partner on this event. It happens biannually in these months, but giving people as much kind of upfront information makes them more likely to want to commit and to continue to commit, right? Part of effective partnerships is just following through on like telling them this is what the partnership will look like, and then the partnership looks like that. If the follow through is there, then I'm going to be more likely to partner again. And then last couple of things. So ensuring clarity and consistency of ongoing communication goals and mediums. So making sure they have access to your communications, automating communications as much as you can to save yourself time. And so they are clearly being communicated with in a kind of a timeline. And then monitor feedback from partners and follow up. So you want to adjust your partnership, how it's running, what they're contributing, and your communication based on their feedback. So make sure you're soliciting ongoing feedback from them and then really doing something with that feedback to where, again, my partnership is effective. And I want to continue to come back and partner. So as we close, the most important thing to remember about, collaborative and effective partnerships is the why behind them. So remember, good partnerships help expand resources and reach so that we can increase our impact on kids. And I thought this was a quote that resonates with me when I think of partnerships, right? The secret is to work less as individuals and more as a team. As a coach, I play not my 11 best, but my best 11. So that's something I just want to kind of leave you guys with today. Is I challenge you to critically think about what combination is the best combination rather than just accumulating partners. So, right, like in this case, I may have 11 people that are really great, but is it what my organization needs right now? Craig, yes, you can. So the question was, if there are grant list specific partners that have not been successful, can you vary your partnerships? Yes, you can. All right, and that is all that I have for you today. So you can catch up with us here. Happy to answer questions. I'll stay on for a few minutes. Of course, Chris. Thank you, Craig. Otto, everyone. You can keep up with us. You can follow us on Twitter. I'll put my email in the chat in case anyone. All right, and then matchmaking starts in the next few minutes. So feel free to jump over to the lounge area to engage in matchmaking, share on the social wall, chat on the discussion board, add resources to your swag bag. Thank you, Nicole. Thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of your day, and I appreciate all of your participation today.